Where was your favorite classroom? In a modern structure with large windows and desks in a circle, or in an old brick building with long rows of wooden desks? My bet is that your favorite classroom was in the great outdoors. In this episode, Exploring North Carolina will demonstrate the magic of nature's classroom with the help of an innovative program from Western North Carolina called Muddy Sneakers. In recent years, there has been great concern among American educators because test results have shown that our students have fallen behind those of many nations in both math and science. There is no shortage of new programs to help our children learn. Smart Start, Head Start, and more at 4. But what makes Muddy Sneakers a unique concept? I had the opportunity to meet with one of its founders, Sandy Schenck, owner of the Green River Preserve near Brevard, North Carolina. I asked Sandy to tell me why Muddy Sneakers was developed.
It's interesting to see how many kids come to camp with really no understanding of nature. The woods is a great big green place, but they rarely set foot in it. So many kids today go home, go inside, turn on the TV, turn on the computer, start playing video games, and don't even venture outside. Children today are, in some cases, afraid to be outside, and their parents are afraid for them to be outside. So children today have very little contact with nature. And in fact, Richard Lou's book, Last Child in the Woods, basically says that just this generation of American children are more removed from nature than any other generation in American history. And that's a concern.
There are many ways to learn. So what is experiential learning, and does it work?
One of the things that I think is so beneficial about Muddy Sneakers is its experiential education. And it's interesting, our naturalists with Muddy Sneakers have a ratio of 1 to 12 kids, or no more than that. So they're the small, intimate groups. So not only are the children learning the natural sciences and experiential education, but the teachers are being taught basically not only good science, but also how to teach experientially. So we're not only working with the children, but the teachers are benefiting from Muddy Sneakers. And the skills that these kids are learning are way beyond just the science. These kids are learning to cooperate, they're learning critical thinking skills, they're learning social skills, they're learning about outdoors and healthy lifestyles, leisure skills like camping and hiking. There's so many benefits that come about as a result of this. We had to convince principals that Muddy Sneakers was going to be something integral to the educational process, that the classroom outside can be a more effective forum for teaching than the classroom inside. We're only taking 6 to 12 days of the school year out of the 180 days, but in those 6 and 12 days we can compress a tremendous amount of learning. That was the leap of faith. They had to believe in that.
You may ask if such programs make business and financial sense, and is there a business plan? Sandy Schenck, who has an MBA from the University of Virginia, has given a lot of thought to the business side of Muddy Sneakers.
And one of the joys of the Muddy Sneakers concept is that it's so inexpensive. The business model of this program makes a lot of sense to me. I run a camp. I know where you spend money in running a camp. And if you can take liability expense, transportation expense, and food expense out of the equation, you greatly reduce your cost of operations. If you take capital expenses, the cost of building buildings, maintaining buildings, take those out of the cost equation, you can really run an inexpensive program, and that's the secret, I think, of Muddy Sneakers. No capital expenses. We're taking advantage of capacities that already exist in the public school system. They've got activity buses that are often parked and not used. They've got a liability policy that already covers field trips, and they've got a school food system to provide basically free of charge bag lunches to their students. Muddy Sneakers cost us about $21 per day per child. We had probably an idealistic approach. We said 1/3 should be paid by the schools, 1/3 by the communities, and then Muddy Sneakers would be trying to get foundations, corporations, and other basically large outfits to help us with the other 1/3. Muddy Sneakers is not an expensive program. Now, to the schools, even $7 commitment per day per child is a significant expense. But in the scheme of things, that is a very modest expense to give the educational benefits that Muddy Sneakers does. The vast majority of that expense is directly paid to the naturalists that are working with the children. There's very little administrative expense. There's no capital expense to speak of. When the children arrive for Muddy Sneakers Day, they're looking at a naturalist. The naturalist will provide them with backpacks with all the materials that they need for the science experiments that they will be using or conducting that day. They circle up, hear the instructions, and then take off in the woods and don't come back until the end of the day.
To help make the program a reality, Sandy and the other founders of Muddy Sneakers found an exciting director in Lauren Agrella Sevilla, a school teacher with experience in middle school and high school, who was a Moorhead Kane Scholar at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. I asked Lauren if the program was enthusiastically embraced by schools from the beginning, or if they encountered any resistance.
When we first started Muddy Sneakers, the founding board of directors was really excited about the potential for learning outdoors, and they felt like 20 days out of the school year we could head out to the woods and learn. And I began by working with some curriculum coordinators around Brevard and Asheville and some of the superintendents and school principals, and they said, 20 days? What are you talking about? Do you know the pressures we're under? And so it was kind of a reality check for our visionary board to be able to say, oh, so we have this idea about this potential paradigm shift. The reality is teachers are under so many pressures to raise test scores in every subject, to accommodate kids with learning disabilities, with physical disabilities who might not be able to travel as easily on trails, teachers reluctant to be outside and hike, making school lunches that are transportable, getting the money for buses. There were a myriad of obstacles once we started talking. The number of days that we arrived at after a lot of conversations with different school districts was that maybe 12 days a year, which is twice a month, two times a month in the fall and 2 times a month in the spring, would be feasible for some. For most of our schools, we see them 6 times a year, so we're able to have one Muddy Sneakers outing in September, October, November, and then again in February, March, and April.
Who are the instructors in Muddy Sneakers, and how does the program relate to a regular school curriculum?
And the heart of what we're doing really is our field instructors. They are these amazingly passionate, excited educators who are just jazzed about nature and getting kids connected with nature. So they've studied really all of our curriculum, trying to really be familiar and know the 5th grade science in North Carolina in and out. But beyond that, they just have a really admirable level of knowledge of the native plants that we'll find in the woods, of the animal habitats, of the changing of the seasons, some of the Appalachian lore that kids in this area might be familiar with if they got to explore the woods with their grandparents. They'll get to check out things like woolly worms, or maybe look at the type of acorn that's on the ground in the fall. We have the luxury of one instructor working with 10 kids perhaps, and so he's able to really draw each one of those students out and maybe ask each child to think of a question as they walk along the trail. And so each student is really asked to be inquisitive and connected with what's going on in the classroom day outdoors. So the crux of Muddy Sneakers is our partnership with public schools. So the program does not exist independent of the schools whatsoever. We're really working directly with classroom teachers. Teachers look at the curriculum, they decide what's developmentally appropriate, what's not appropriate for their students. We have an ongoing dialogue, and that feedback loop is really what Muddy Sneakers is all about, that we're working on the topics that teachers are teaching in their classrooms. That's what we study in the woods. So there's a direct connection there. And then we're also seeing kids as a regular feature of the academic year. It's not an isolated field trip. It's not something disconnected from what's happening. They studied cloud types yesterday, they observe clouds today, they review them tomorrow.
I asked Sandy and Lauren if Muddy Sneakers is working, and if so, what's the proof?
I think the proof of Muddy Sneakers is, so to speak, in the pudding. We've got schools now that are lining up to participate, and we have more demand for Muddy Sneakers programming than we have capacity to supply them. Schools see that we're not only improving end-of-grade test scores, but it's wonderful for the children enjoy it, it's good for the teachers, it's good for the environmental community, and more schools want to participate than we can possibly help at the moment.
It turns out that a lot of the things we were hoping to see at the beginning of Muddy Sneakers are actually coming to be. Some even more than we could have imagined, in that test scores on North Carolina's end-of-grade science tests are really markedly increased among Muddy Sneakers students versus those not participating in the program. So we're getting anecdotal evidence that kids with some learning disabilities and attention deficit are actually seeing a little greater success, according to their teachers, in the way they're able to connect with the material, because they can be more kinesthetic and they can be more hands-on. There's a big experiential element that is really helpful in the way the program is taught. So we got a letter from a teacher last spring, and she was really excited about Muddy Sneakers and just wanted to share the influence that the program had had on her relationship with her students. She's going to finish her career here in another 3 years. She's been teaching for 27 years and said that the year with Muddy Sneakers was one of her best ever as a teacher, because she was able to forge these connections with her students that went beyond the way she's able to get to know them in the classroom. They got to have these common experiences in the woods on cold days, climbing mountains, exploring new things, finding new discoveries. And she was saying she got to know the kids on a level that really enhanced the way she was able to work with them and continue to build positive learning environment in her classroom back at school.
To find out more about this unique outdoor learning concept, Exploring North Carolina went on some Muddy Sneakers outings, visited with teachers, and most of all, with students. Our first stop was Pisgah Forest Elementary School in Brevard. First, I was able to ask several fifth grade teachers if they had initial concerns about taking time away from their busy classroom schedules.
I was somewhat apprehensive at first about giving up class time. I'm the language arts teacher, the reading and language arts teacher, and I was concerned because we were going to be outside all day for science, and that meant I wouldn't get my reading time in.
Well, I was a little apprehensive at first. It was a lot of days out of the calendar, and when you start looking at all the other little things that happen around a school year, you take away another 10 or 12 or whatever amount of days, it worries you that you won't get everything in.
At first we were nervous about taking time out of our busy schedule to go out in the woods, and it was a new program, so we just didn't know if this was going to really be effective or not.
I wanted to know from the teachers if the time in nature's classroom had been of benefit to them, and most of all, to their students.
One of the main things I've noticed in language arts with them being outdoors is that we have a better connection with each other. And because of that, I think we have better rapport. We can talk better with each other, and that helps them in their writing because I know more things to talk to them about, things to suggest for them to write, and they seem to do better with it because of that. Having a classroom outside is well worth the time. It's worth it in many ways, not only in the way the children feel about themselves, but in the relationships that we share with each other. It also has helped tremendously on test scores. We've made wondrous improvements in science scores.
But once we get out there, you see that they learn 3 or 4 or 5 times more what they would learn from a textbook or from experiment or any other material used in the classroom. They pick up on it so much better when they can be immersed in it and live it, what's out there and how it applies to our science. You can see an enormous growth in the students from beginning to end, those who participate in the Muddy Sneakers program. We had some students who weren't successful in any aspect of school, but by the end of the year they were successful on their in the classroom on their state assessments based on the things they learned from being out in the woods and following the Muddy Sneakers program. You see them become much more relaxed out in the woods, much more comfortable hiking through the trails. Several of them at the start of the year can barely hike up the hill, let alone go all day out there, and they get exhausted and red-faced. And as we go through it through the course of the year, they get past that and they start to appreciate how everything is around them and how it applies to life and what we're doing in the classroom.
The results that I have seen from Muddy Sneakers is not only just the test scores, it's their excitement when they bring things in from the playground because they want to share it with me, or they've been out with their parents during the weekend and they've discovered a new leaf and they bring it in and we have to Google it and identify it and talk about it and look at it. And they even shared their enthusiasm with the second grade class, and we took the second grade class out on a mini Muddy Sneaker lesson, and my class, my fifth grade class, got to teach the second grade class things that they had learned at Muddy Sneakers, so it was very exciting. So it benefits not just in test scores, we don't just see it in the test scores, we also see it in them and how they look at the world and nature and the environment, and they want to share that.
Certainly the most fun for me was getting to ask the fifth graders what they had learned outdoors.
Whenever you're in a classroom and you're learning about a new plant, well, you only get to see pictures of it or like go on the internet and look at like information about it. But when you're outside, you can actually touch the plant and see it like firsthand. Whenever you're in a classroom, you can easily get bored just by sitting and looking at the teacher all day. But when you're outside, you feel like more free and like not like everyone's listening to you.
Well, if you're outdoors, it's hard to be in a classroom and understand everything because all you have is pictures, and if all you look at is pictures all day long, you don't experience like you could while you're outside, because you get to live it firsthand. Well, we saw one of the things is like lizards and salamanders, because we caught one on a leaf on our last Muddy Sneakers trip. There was a red F, and it was kind of weird because it was all crumpled up, and we thought it was dead, and when we stopped to learn about it, it got up and it started crawling around on the leaf, so we had to put it in the forest. And then later we came by a stream, and we thought we should have put it near there so it could get some water.
Well, when we're in the classroom, you don't have much space for your thoughts because you're in a confined space. But when you're outdoors, you have so much room, and it's very enjoyable because you can actually feel the nature around you. Well, like the air, and you can also hear the nature too, and you can hear birds and trees and winds blowing. And in the classroom, all you can hear is people sniffling and moving around, and but outside it's so beautiful and everything. Well, I think of science as a song because I love to sing. And I'll probably, if I'm a music teacher and I'm writing music or something, I'll probably spend a lot of time outside because like nature is just like a song, like I said, no other song can match up to it.
I like that in the classroom, you don't get any attention from the teacher yourself. She's always helping other people, and you don't get any attention from the teacher. Now outside in Muddy Sneakers, you get to spend quality time with your instructors, and you get to learn more because we're in smaller groups. Instead of groups of 20 or 22, you're in groups of like 5, 6, 7, 8.
Well, the biggest wow moment was probably at the side seeing a copperhead, but it just slithered on past. Well, they pretty much said that he has a perfect place to raise his kids and all that, and they do so good because there's a bunch of little animals that it can catch and eat off of.
Well, it helps because if we were learning about a specific tree just in a regular old classroom in school, we couldn't see it on first hand, but if we do it outside, we could see it on first hand. Like one time on my first Muddy Sneakers trip, we seen sassafras, and its roots was made to make root beer.
These students are not the only ones excited about an outdoor classroom. I had the chance while on the trail to talk with two naturalists working with Muddy Sneakers, Molly Dullanty and Carlton Burke.
The comfort level really changes with the more expeditions that we do. They're much more comfortable being outside all day long. This is a new thing for a lot of them. Using the bathroom in the woods, we encourage that and teach them how to do that, and a lot of them are really apprehensive about that in the beginning. And by the end, it's just no big deal at all. It's just like using any other bathroom. Last year, at the very end, we had them write letters, what does Muddy Sneakers mean to me? And the best example I can think of was one of the girls wrote that she was a real girly girl and didn't want to be outside at all. And she loved being outside, and she thought learning outside was absolutely great. So they change from their own perceptions as well and what they think it's going to be like to what it actually is like, and that makes them much more comfortable outside.
Well, there's a lot of those aha moments. Actually, you know, the kids go out and they see something that suddenly clicks, something that they saw maybe on a TV show that they suddenly saw in the wild, or they see an animal for the first time and they didn't know what its role in the environment was, and it just suddenly clicks that these things are out there, they do different things, that everything has a purpose and a reason. And there's so many aha moments, it's almost like they all mix into one, but it seems like every class you go out and you have those moments, and the kids just come away with something new and different each and every time, and it's just so neat to see them suddenly see the world around them in a different way and be exposed to things that they've never seen before. If they have, they've never actually experienced it. Maybe they've seen it on a TV show or something like that, but to actually experience in the wild and be there and make that connection is just really special for us instructors.
Is a program like Muddy Sneakers applicable to other parts of the state or suited only to the mountain area? Sandy Schenck and Laura Negrella Sevilla made it clear that this program concept is very portable.
One of the reasons we're so excited about Muddy Sneakers is it's a portable concept. It works here in western North Carolina, but it'll also work in eastern North Carolina, work in virtually any town in North Carolina, virtually anywhere in the United States. There are environmental resources all around us, and one of the things that Muddy Sneakers does is it puts the kids on a school bus for a very short period of time and goes to visit local, close-by resources. Naturalists can use virtually any outdoor area to teach what lessons are required with the 5th grade curriculum. So the portability of Muddy Sneakers, I think, is one of its key attributes. This is a concept that can be used all over North Carolina.
I'd encourage any school district where there's a critical mass of interest in this kind of learning and experiential education and outdoor education in connecting kids to nature, to get some minds together and start to see how much momentum really is there. And if there's enough momentum, a program like Muddy Sneakers, a similar program can have great success at working with kids on a regular basis in the outdoor classroom.
On Exploring North Carolina, we believe that every child deserves time outside, and we know that there are a variety of programs to introduce them to the natural world. We must all work to make sure that students in every school get quality time outside with qualified instructors. Our kids deserve no less while exploring North Carolina.